We stand for justice today. The evidence clearly demonstrates the truth of our claims, and I urge you to consider it carefully.
He stood in the courtroom with his hands clasped tightly, a faint tremor hidden behind his notes. To the jury, he was just another young attorney trying to prove himself. To the man across from him, he was no one, a forgotten child from a closed foster file, a name buried in dust. But what that man didn't know was that the boy he'd once locked in a closet now stood in the one place where silence finally had a voice. If you've ever dreamed of standing face to face with your past and walking out stronger, drop a like and sit back. This story is for you. Ethan Cole never had a family photo, no birthdays, no bedtime stories, just the cracked walls of foster home run by Robert Haynes, a man the community praised as a savior of lost kids. Neighbors waved from porches when he passed, grateful that someone was taking in children the world had thrown away. They saw a man of discipline. But Ethan saw something else. The belt, the darkness, the quiet that followed the sound of the lock clicking on the closet door. He was 10 when he learned what fear could sound like. Some nights, Haynes would whisper through the door, "Cry all you want. No one's coming for you." And Ethan would trace circles on the floor with his finger, counting seconds just to remember time was still moving. When morning came, he'd sit at the kitchen table, staring at a plate of cold eggs, pretending not to exist. He didn't know then that surviving was the beginning of his education. He studied Haynes's face, his words, his habits. He learned how people lie, how power hides cruelty behind kindness, and how silence, when used right, can become a weapon sharper than any word. Years later, when another child escaped and told the police, the officers came. But by the time they knocked, Haynes was gone. There were no charges, no closure. The file was marked unsubstantiated. Ethan was moved again. A different town, a different school. The same ache. He was quiet, small for his age, and always drawing. Teachers thought he was shy. They never asked why he flinched when someone raised their voice. Years passed, and while other kids dreamed of cars in college, Ethan dreamed of justice. He didn't want to be rich. He wanted to know how men like Robert Haynes got away with everything. He found the answer in an old library, buried between dust and silence, law books. He read until the words blurred, until he understood the system that failed him and how to speak its language better than anyone who ever used it against him. By 27, Ethan had earned his law degree. He was meticulous, almost obsessive, taking the hardest cases, the ones everyone else refused. He fought for the voiceless because he'd once been one. Then one morning, a case file landed on his desk. The name on the cover stopped his breath. Robert Haynes. The charges were different this time. Fraud, coercion, exploitation. Older now, but the same face staring back from the photograph. Ethan looked into those same eyes, at the same monster. As he closed the file slowly, he could almost hear the faint creak of that closet door again. This time, he would open it. Comment justice if he believes silence can still speak. Weeks later, the courtroom filled with whispers. Reporters lined the benches. Haynes sat at the defense table with an expensive suit, a smug expression, and arrogance polished by years of getting away with everything. He didn't recognize Ethan. Why would he? To Haynes, children were interchangeable. Their names faded and their pain was invisible. But Ethan remembered everything. He stood, calm but cold, and began his opening statement.
Your Honor, the evidence will show a pattern, not of mistakes, but of manipulation. Of trust used as a weapon. Of power without mercy.
Haynes chuckled under his breath, leaning to his lawyer. The kid rehearsed that one in the mirror, he muttered. The judge glanced over.
Mr. Haynes, you'll remain silent during proceedings.
Haynes smirked, his expression unbothered. It was the same smirk Ethan had seen through the crack of that closet door 20 years ago. Witness after witness took the stand. Former employees, clients, people who had trusted Haynes and been betrayed. Each testimony chipped away at the mask he wore, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. Then Ethan called his final witness.
Your Honor, the prosecution calls Robert Haynes.
The courtroom stirred. Even Haynes's lawyer froze for a moment. Haynes stood, straightened his tie, and walked to the witness stand with the swagger of a man who believed in his own invincibility. Ethan waited, then quietly,
Mr. Haynes, do you recall every child who passed through your home?
Haynes smirked. Of course. I cared for dozens. Some ungrateful, some broken beyond repair. You learn to forget. Ethan nodded. He stepped closer, voice steady.
Do you remember a boy who used to draw stars on the walls?
Haynes hesitated.
A boy who counted seconds when you locked the door?
Ethan repeated. The courtroom went still. Haynes blinked. Try to read him. What are you talking about? Ethan reached into his briefcase and pulled out a small, faded sketch, a child's drawing of a candle in the dark. He placed it on the witness stand.
Does this look familiar?
Haynes stared at it, his confidence slipping. I don't remember every scribble from 20 years ago. Ethan's voice dropped, barely above a whisper.
You should. Because that was the only light I had.
Gasps rippled through the room. The judge leaned forward.
Mr. Cole, are you implying?
Ethan raised a hand gently.
No, Your Honor. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating a fact.
He turned to the jury.
I was that boy.
The courtroom fell into silence. Complete, suffocating silence. Even Haynes's lawyer lowered his gaze. Ethan continued, his voice no longer trembling.
I was 10 years old when Robert Haynes decided my silence was worth more than my safety. When he taught me what fear felt like. When he told me no one would ever listen. But here we are.
He took a step closer to the stand.
Do you still believe no one's coming, Mr. Haynes?
Haynes's lips moved, but no sound came out. For the first time in his life, he was speechless. The courtroom held its breath. Ethan turned back to the judge.
No further questions.
The rest of the trial passed like a blur. Evidence confirmed, testimony aligned, and Haynes's empire collapsed under the weight of truth. When the verdict came, guilty on all counts, Ethan didn't cheer. He just exhaled slowly. Haynes looked at him one last time as the guards placed handcuffs around his wrists. You think this changes anything? Ethan met his gaze, steady.
It changes everything.
Later that evening, Ethan sat alone in his apartment. The city outside hummed with life, but he was still. He opened a small box. Inside were sketches from his childhood. Stars, doors, a boy holding a candle. He smiled faintly, then closed the lid. The light didn't need to be imagined anymore. We live in a world that forgets how much strength it takes just to stay standing. But sometimes, the smallest voice is the one that changes everything. Justice isn't always a gavel or a cell. Sometimes, it's just a man walking free from his past and knowing that silence no longer owns him. If this story moved you, please leave a like and share it. Because someone out there still believes no one will ever listen. By sharing this video, you can let them know that you do. Don't forget to click on the notification bell so you never miss another True Humanity story like this. This has been a True Humanity Chronicle, a story that reminds us what it means to be human